Your hosts are here, Sammie and Michelle. By the end of this podcast, you'll know them well. Adulting, navigating the journey of life. Careers to relationships, pain and strife. Put down the rule book, rethink the status quo. If there's another direction you wanna go, find purpose, passion and mastery in all that you do. With Status Post Adulting.
Hey, Status Post Adulting fam! This is Sammie
and Michelle.
And you're listening to the 79th episode of Status Post Adulting, where we are talking about decision fatigue.
Yes, we are, Sammie. I'm really excited. I think this topic is really interesting because it's something we deal with every single day. And a 2016 study found that the average American adult, it's estimated, makes 35,000 decisions a day.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. No wonder we get a little bit fatigued.
It is so true, Michelle. I notice decision fatigue all the time, and fortunately, there are ways to combat it, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Exactly, Sammie. And to pull a formal definition of decision fatigue, it describes the impaired ability to make decisions and control behavior as a consequence of repeated acts of decision making.
Exactly, Michelle. The more decisions we make throughout a day, the less good of a job we do making those decisions.
It's true, Sammie. What's interesting is that studies find so far that making decisions is one of a few different things that we do that actually is exercising our brain in a way, but we get tired because it's like using the same muscle over and over and over again all day. And so eventually you end up losing the ability to make decisions, you get tired, you become more impulsive. And so there are a lot of things to think about if you want to structure your day and sort of work towards combating decision fatigue.
Yes, and the most successful people out there find ways to deal with decision fatigue so that they don't become impulsive and they don't make rash decisions. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to help you guys, just like we helped ourselves, combat decision fatigue by implementing some simple hacks.
Exactly, Sammie. And I think it's important because it helps so much with productivity. If you're trying to get more out of your day, if you're trying to figure out ways to structure your day so that you can really perform at an optimal level and give yourself the ability to make sure that when you're making key decisions, you're really in the best place and in the best mental headspace.
That's right, Michelle. Which brings us to ways that we can combat decision fatigue. I find that one of the most helpful ways to combat decision fatigue is by creating routine. For example, there are thousands of little decisions that we could make every day. We wake up, we have to decide what we're going to wear, we have to decide how we're going to wash our face, what we're going to eat for breakfast. And I think if we leave it up to us, by like the middle of the day, we've already made tons of decisions. Versus if we do the same thing every day, if we create routines, we just know what we're going to do, and we don't have to exert willpower or exert executive functioning to decide what's going to happen next.
It's true, Sammie. If you think about those 35,000 decisions, it's not really big decisions. It's all of the little decisions that make up our day, from when we wake up in the morning to when we go to sleep at night. And so I agree. I think a routine actually helps you eliminate a lot of those decisions, or they make those decisions easier. Because if you wake up at the same time every day, or if your day is structured in the same way every single week, then you don't have to think about, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I eat this? Should I eat that? All of those little things, you can just eliminate them or make them easier because you already know automatically you're going to do all of those things.
Exactly, Michelle. And I think to me, I'm a very routine-oriented person, and there are some decisions that I have the same every single day. Like every day for breakfast, I eat the same thing, my cottage cheese with sardines, with everything bagels, seasoning, and olive oil.
Delicious.
Nutritious and delicious. things like desserts, I just cut them out. Like, I don't have to make a decision about whether I eat a cookie today or a brownie today, or whether it's a cheat day or whether it's a holiday. I'm like, I just don't eat those things.
I think you make a really good point there, Sammie, when it comes to bad habits that you're trying to cut out, like eating sugar, social media, drinking was one of them for me. It's actually so much harder for me to make a decision on the fly on whether or not I should get dessert at dinner, whether or not I should have a drink when I go out. For me, I think the reason a lot of things I've just simply eliminated is that when I eliminate them, I'm actually so much happier because I know my answer is nope, I'm not going to do that. There is no circumstance where I am putting that into my body.
I do the same thing for my patients. A big part of health is diet and what you eat. And, we're not taught a lot about diet in school, actually, just because there is so much conflicting information on diet, and patients have to deal with that too. When you tell them to eat healthy, everybody has a different picture of what healthy means. So I start with like the biggest one that I think can make the biggest difference for everybody, which is eat less than 24 grams of sugar a day. I go through it, that's going to mean that you're not drinking sugary beverages. You're mostly not really eating desserts. You're cutting out a lot of, really sugary fruits and things. And I find that if most people do that, they will lose weight and their health will improve significantly. So instead of giving them like a list of foods that could be okay, and oh, these are organic, and oh, these are processed, and these might have other effects, I try to keep it as simple as possible to begin with, because there are things that are more important than other things. So I start with eating less than 24 grams of sugar a day.
That's a good point, Sammie. And I think on the flip side too, when you think about decision fatigue and giving and receiving advice, I know I've been in that situation where people will give me all of these options. They're like, you can do this. And of all of the things you can invest in index funds. And of all the index funds, you can invest in all of these ones. And I'm just like, can you just tell me what to do? Like, can you just pick one for me? Because it gets so overwhelming to have to choose a million different ones, but it can feel also like such a big, important decision. And so I find that a lot of times if I'm giving advice or if I'm receiving advice, I prefer to have less options. I don't necessarily want to know the full 50 million things that I could do to make a decision. I just want 1, 2 max.
And speaking of money and decision fatigue, this is a big area where you do not want to let things go to the wayside and make impulsive decisions or procrastinate the decisions because you just don't want to make another decision. That's why automating your finances can be really big in helping reduce decision fatigue. For example, for me, a good portion of my income goes to investing, and then a good portion goes to saving, and then the rest comes to me. And yes, if I don't spend all of the money that I allot for disposable income for myself, I can invest it. But even without having to think about that, I know that automatically I'm saving and investing every single pay period.
That's a good point, Sammie. Evidence suggests that individuals experiencing decision fatigue demonstrate an impaired ability to make trade-offs, prefer passive role in decision-making process, and often make choices that are impulsive or irrational. I think that's relevant to what you're saying, because if you get home at the end of the day, you need to figure out what you're going to eat. It's so much easier to be like, I'm just going to go and, you impulsively make the decision to go out and eat and go to McDonald's. Or you don't have the energy. And even if you had all of these goals around what you were going to eat, you now are like, I'm just going to go and do something else because I'm tired. I've made 1,000 decisions today and I don't want to do this anymore.
You bring up a really great point, because I think we look at people who are successful and we're like, they have so much willpower. They never eat sweets and they exercise every day and they work really hard at their job and get things done on time. And it's like, really? They don't have willpower, they have routines.
That's a good point, Sammie. I feel like the more I learn about very successful people, for example, I think Tim Ferriss is the first time I heard about decision fatigue. But what you realize is that a lot of these people, what they're actually doing is just limiting the amount of decisions they have to make. I even heard Jeff Bezos speak on this. He was like, my whole job and success at this time is to make big, important decisions. So I need to do whatever I need to do to make sure that when the time comes, I am in the perfect headspace to make that decision.
That's exactly right, Michelle. The first point that we talked about as far as combating decision fatigue was routines. But I think another aspect is not overcomplicating things in the first place. And I know sometimes life gets complicated and it's kind of outside of our hands. But a lot of times we let our lives get overcomplicated. We agree to hang out with 5 people this week, and we agree to take on additional responsibilities that are not important to us and that we really don't have time for. And so by saying no to a lot of things that we actually don't really want in our life, we allow ourselves to have the time to make very good decisions and to create very good routines and structures to our day.
It's so true, Sammie. I was thinking, when you have these 35,000 decisions to make every day, and you know by the end of the day that you're going to be tired, don't waste your willpower, don't waste your decision-making energy on the small stuff. I think to your point, if you can eat the same breakfast every day, or you can wear the same outfit every day, go ahead and do that. What it really comes down to is look at your values. If you don't care what you look like, you can pull the Mark Zuckerberg wearing the same t-shirt every day. If you don't care about your breakfast every workday and you just want it to be, say, healthy, then you can eat cottage cheese and sardines, and you just know every single morning that's what you're going to eat, and you're not wasting your energy on the little decisions.
And that goes the same for overcomplicating your life. If you don't value going to happy hour with your friends every day, don't do it. It's just going to give you even more decisions. You're going to get there, then you're going to have to decide what to eat, then you're going to decide who's going to pay. It's too complicated. Just completely skip it if that's not something you value. And that even goes for bigger decisions in our life. I think a lot of times, we feel pressure to do what everybody else is doing, like buy a house or get married or have kids. But if those things are not important to us, don't participate, because you're just giving yourself an entire new category of decisions to make when it's not even something you value.
I agree, Sammie. I think with the decision making, a lot of it is anything that you can front load. So you know what your values are, you know what's important to you. And so that way you can say easily if something's a strong no or not. And then from there, what I do, if there are things that I value, take, for example, for me, I really enjoy going on vacations with my friends. However, I realized recently that if I said yes to everything, I would be traveling all the time. I would be going everywhere. I would probably be broke. And I've adjusted this over time. Now I'm doing very little traveling. But what I actually did at a certain point, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a list of requirements that if this activity, if this vacation doesn't meet these specific requirements, I'm automatically going to say no. And it makes things so much easier.
Yeah, Michelle. For me, I try to only agree to maximum 2 travel events a quarter, because otherwise I just get too tired and it stops becoming fun because I'm really not getting to do all my normal things that I enjoy doing.
And I think it's important too, Sammie, because part of the reason you're making these decisions easier is because I think the goal for a lot of people is that there's a big thing that they're focused on, whether it's a specific project, whether it's their work, whether it's their kids. There's something where they're like, this is my big focus. And what happens is all of these little questions, all of these little decisions we have to make are starting to pull us away from that big thing. So if you can define, this is the thing I'm working towards this quarter, everything else is getting a no, or these are the things that are going to get a hard no, it's going to make you actually accomplish more in life because you'll be able to focus more because you don't have to be tempted, essentially, with every little option that comes up.
Even for this podcast, Michelle and I do things to make it so that it's easier for us to actually complete the podcast without having to make a trillion decisions. We used to just be like, oh, it's the weekend. This is when I don't work. So we'll do the podcast at some point. And then both of us separately and yet together would have to make a decision of when we would do the podcast, when we're both in the mood, when we would then eat. Are we going to do the entire podcast at once, or are we going to research and take a break? It involves thousands of tiny little decisions. And now to create a better structure and to avoid having any decision fatigue by the time we actually get to recording, we have a structure where we're like, at this time we'll meet and we'll discuss the podcast. At this time we're going to take a break and eat. At this time we're going to set up our microphones. At this time we're going to record. Having all of that structured into our day completely changes the attitude in which we approach the podcast.
Yes, Sammie. Actually, there's a lot of things we do to try to maintain our relationship by eliminating decision making. Another thing is that because Sammie and I now will drive 2 hours to go to a major city very often, because that's just how it is, because we live in the middle of nowhere, we actually made the decision that anytime we drive somewhere, as soon as we get there, we're going to find the closest Panera and then we're going to eat. Mm-hmm. And the reason we did that is because we would go somewhere, we would be tired, we'd be like, should we eat? Shouldn't we eat? Where should we eat? Should we go eat somewhere like different and fun? And we would just end up actually coming at each other because we were both tired and didn't want to make a decision. And so one day Sammie was like, let's just do this as our standard. We can deviate it from it if we feel strongly about it, but we know that we'll probably find a Panera somewhere. We know we like the food good enough. We'll have a place to sit. We can go to the bathroom. And actually, it's great. Like, it really makes it so that when we do a long road trip, we fight less. We just get along better because we don't have to try to make a decision when we're so tired.
Yeah, Michelle's right. We're not so hangry when we just know that we're going to go to Panera. And the best thing about Panera is they have options that are not going to make you so sleepy after you eat them. So we go there, we get our U-Pick 2. Maybe later in the day when we're still in that city and we're like a little bit more energized, we'll do a little sushi or something that we can't normally do in our town. We also can't do Panera in our town, but we'll do something a little bit fancier than even Panera is for us. Then it's really enjoyable versus if we just got there and we're like, oh, let's choose like something to eat of all the possibilities. Like, no, when we go somewhere, we eat Panera, period.
Guys, it honestly helps so much. And also another tip I have when it comes to decision fatigue and your partnerships is what I've learned living with Sammie is you also have to respect other people's capacity to make a decision. Let me explain what I mean.
Please do.
So in Sammie's case, and I think this is going to be really relevant to a lot of our listeners who also work in healthcare, people who work in healthcare across the board are making so many decisions a day, a lot of which are extremely serious, could be life or death decisions, and they're just doing that constantly. They really don't get too much of a break during the day. And so what I realized with Sammie is that she would come home and I would want to give her options. And I would say, what do you want for dinner? Should we cook? Should we eat? Should we do this? Do you have food? Do I have food? And she just would be totally useless in that regard because she was tired and she would just get frustrated. And I started to realize like, oh, this is actually just another decision for Sammie to make. And she is spent. And so instead what I do is I'll be like, hey, I bought Domino's, or hey, I cooked some food, or hey, we're doing something separate for dinner. And she actually likes that so much better. Even though I'm making the decision for her, it's so much better because she is not having to choose one more thing after a day of having to make 1,000 decisions.
It's true, Michelle. It's funny because when I was looking up decision fatigue, a lot of it was related to healthcare providers. And I think it's true. Like I hear a lot of people say like, oh, you work for 8 hours, but you actually work 4. And I think if you're a healthcare provider, you're like, no, not at all. Like there's patients every 15 minutes. And then as soon as you get out of the room, like someone like, you know, some other staff member is trying to ask you a question regarding another patient. And then the phone's ringing and it's another patient. And then you're looking at your labs and then you have to call other patients. And then you're getting reports from specialists and you have to call other patients. And this is going on all day long for like 8 hours straight. And then you're done. And it's just decisions on decisions on decisions. And I think being able to just acknowledge that like you have no space for decisions after work is really helpful.
Yeah. One of the tricks with decision fatigue is just knowing it exists and being cognizant of when you are going through times where you're making more decisions than usual. It is truly a real phenomenon that's been studied that suggests that as we make more decisions every single day, By the time we get to the end, we're in the worst position to make a decision. We'll act impulsively. And a lot of times, that's actually the time when we make the worst decisions as well.
So, takeaways for today's episode. 1, acknowledge that decision fatigue exists. Acknowledge that those first few decisions that you make in the morning, you're going to have more bandwidth for than those last decisions that you're making at the end of the day. And knowing that, create routines. Don't try to make every little thing that happens in your day be a decision. Simplify things. Make it so that you do the same thing for a majority of these menial tasks or even important things that you just want to make sure you include. Make sure you have a routine for everything that can be automated. And number 2, don't even bring in complicated things into your life. If it's not something that you want to participate in, if it's not something that brings you joy, don't overcomplicate your life with it. Whether it's social engagements or other projects or big life decisions, you choose what your life path is so that you're making decisions that are valuable to you instead of tons of little decisions that you don't even care about.
That's right, Sammie. So let us know what you think. If you have any thoughts on decision fatigue, if there's any decisions that you yourself have automated or that you've removed from your life, we would definitely be interested to hear about it. It's such a almost simple concept, but I think it actually has a really big influence on your day-to-day. So if you implement this and you notice a difference, definitely let us know.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next time as we put down the rulebook and rethink the status quo.
Hey everyone, welcome to Status Post, our episode.
Hello.
Our after show, post-episode, post-production.
Name still in progress.
Sparty.
Sparty.
Status post-adulting spa party. That one's going to be thrown out.
It's going to be thrown out. I mean, we're from Michigan, so it's just going to cause too much controversy.
That's true. We can't choose sides.
We really can't.
But we basically use this time now to chat a little bit. Episode is done. We've talked about the different topics. So if that's all you're interested in, feel free to exit.
You are free to leave, and you have done a great job listening to the podcast, and you do not have to listen to our banter.
Thank you so much for listening. Outside of that, Sammie, how have you been?
I'm doing good. As you know, I have been investing in myself. I have a therapist now, and I also have a shamanic counselor. So regularly every week, I'm checking in and I'm learning about myself, and it's been really insightful.
Oh yeah, how's it going, Sammie?
It's going really good. With my therapist, we're talking about what my values are. So I'm getting to see, what those are, what they mean to me, and kind of acknowledging that those are me, and I might think that I'd be a better, more virtuous person if I have other values, but just acknowledging that this is me and I'm okay with that. I can only be who I am. And then with my shamanic counselor, I've been taking shamanic journeys and coming closer to my life purpose. Really, both of them are helping me get to my soul contract. And I think that's why, I signed up for both of these in the first place, is to kind of really align and really get deep into what I meant to do on this planet.
I love that, Sammie. I think therapy is so good. And it sounds like the shamanic healing is also good. So I'm happy to hear it's going well. And I have seen a huge change in you. And we've talked about a lot of different stuff that you're talking about with these people. So I'm excited.
It's super fun. And every Saturday I get to talk to one of them, some Saturdays, both of them. And I was talking to my mom about my therapy / shamanic counselor experiences.
Oh gosh. And just to let people know, Sammie, our mom is very supportive. Mm-hmm. However, like a lot of Indian parents,
minorities in general,
probably people who have immigrant parents, we can only speak for our mother, but she is, how do I say this? Not the most open to the concept of therapy.
She feels like therapists are quacks.
There was a time last year where I figured I was talking about therapy. Either I was going or I was recommending it to her, which was obviously not great. And I literally was like, what about a therapist? And she was like, a shrink? And I was like, I'm not sure, but I feel like that's a derogatory term. Like, I don't know if you can say that anymore. But she has come a long way. I think before she thought it was completely a waste of time and totally stupid and useless. And now she seems open to the fact that people can get something out of it. Not her herself specifically, but other people.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's very true. Yes. And I was telling her about my therapy. This is when I had my first day of both of them. So I had both on the same day. So I was telling her about my regular therapy session where we talked about my 5 main values and how that was so insightful. And then I was talking to her about my shamanic therapist. And I was talking to her about how during this session, my shamanic therapist kept getting these signals about my job. And ultimately, she was just like, is there something going on with your work? Because I keep getting these messages about your job. And there was stuff that I was trying to work out with my work. So I thought that was so interesting that she picked up on that because she's a shamanic counselor. She does like journeys with me, but she also is super intuitive and like somewhat psychic to some degree. So I was telling my mom about this and my mom was like, is she psychic? And I explained to her that, you know, she's intuitive and she does get signals from spirit. You know, psychic may not be the word that I would have used, but yes, she is in tune with source energy. And I thought my mom probably thought this was like a little bit strange, which I could understand because I can understand the perspective of the other people, normal people listening to this might find it a little odd. But later, when I was talking to her about the insights from my shamanic counselor, she was like, you know what? If you want to, you can just get rid of your regular counselor. And that's when I realized, literally, in our family, it is more normal to go to a psychic than to go to a regular counselor who has a PhD in psychology. She's a doctor, people. But no, that's a quack.
Yeah, I was really surprised to hear her say that. But I think, strangely, I don't even know if this is specific to her, but yeah, she was so much more open to the spiritual counselor. And she was just like, that really resonated with her. And yet, we still have a little bit of ways to go, I think, Sammie, in terms of converting her to the values of going to therapy, a professional, a non-psychic professional, to be able to talk through some things that are going on in your life.
It's so true. And I realize this is probably true of a lot of minorities because like a lot of patients at work, I'll see them have like the evil eye on or like they'll talk about how they do exorcisms and stuff. But as soon as I bring up, I'm like, oh, do you want to like see a therapist? Immediately it's like, no. That's crazy.
It's like funny because I'm like, what do people fear that would happen in normal therapy that wouldn't happen in something that was like more spiritual or more outside the box, if you will? Like, I think I would be like, oh, shoot, if this person is hypnotizing me, what if they like put a spell on me or something? Meanwhile, this poor therapist is just trying to listen to you, basically, honestly. And they're like, no. Nope.
Talking about my feelings, that doesn't really seem like the way to go. Bringing in a spirit guide from the other world, that makes a lot of sense.
For a culture where people really like to talk a lot, it's weird that they're so hesitant at the idea of talking to somebody for an hour straight.
For people who are constantly unsolicitedly talking about their feelings to everybody who will listen, whether you're the cashier,
bus driver,
the bank teller,
Uber driver,
for some reason paying to go to someone to do this is just too far.
As somebody who has solicited advice from a lot of random people, let me tell you, it's not as good as when you get paid professional help.
You know, I'm not going to lie. I had never seen a therapist before, and I am impressed with how objective she can be. Like, she doesn't put her own opinion into like what my life or my life goals should be. Like, she sees my values and she sees what they are, and she tries to make that work for me. It's hard for me to do that with other people. Like, if my friend's like talking about their boyfriend who's like wasting their time, it's hard for me to say anything other than leave him, because I'm like, why would you even bother time with them? But then like the therapist can be like, hey, I know you highly value partnership, so I'm going to like specifically tailor this advice for you. You know, they're trained professionals. They do a good job. That's all I got to say.
All that schooling really helps.
All that schooling seems to make a difference.
I totally agree, Sammie. People will tell me what their therapist has said after I've given them advice, and I'm like, oof, yeah, that's way better. That's paid help. Like, this person is just getting to the root of your problem. So if you're thinking about therapy, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Yes.
Not cheap, not easy to find, not easy to get, but
maybe your insurance covers it. Mine is definitely not cheap, but 100% worth it.
Totally agree, Sammie. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening today.
Thank you. Have a good one.